The crystalline walls of Luna Station gleamed under artificial starlight as President Maria Evans stepped onto the observation deck. The peace summit with the Helix Syndicate had been 3 years in the making, and humanity's first official contact with an alien civilization hung in the balance. "The delegations are assembling, Madam President," her aide whispered. Adjusting his collar nervously, President Evans nodded, her gray hair catching the light from distant Earth. At 62, she had weathered political storms that would have broken lesser leaders. But this was different. This was history. The Helix representatives emerged from their transport pods, their elongated forms moving with fluid grace. Their leader, Ambassador Kell, approached with what humans had learned to interpret as a diplomatic gesture. "President Evans," Kell's translated voice carried an odd harmonic quality. "The Syndicate appreciates your species' eagerness for peaceful relations." The words seemed cordial enough, but something in the alien's posture made Evans's instincts prickle. She had not survived decades in politics without learning to read between the lines. "The pleasure is mutual, Ambassador," she replied, extending her hand in the human custom. The meeting began smoothly. Trade agreements, territorial boundaries, technological exchanges, all standard diplomatic fare. But as the hours passed, Evans noticed the aliens' questions growing more pointed. They asked about Earth's military capabilities, population centers, resource distribution. Curious minds, aren't we? She deflected with a politician's smile. Then the lights went out. Emergency. Power kicked in a heartbeat later, but it was too late. President Evans felt the familiar tingle of a transport beam, her body dematerializing as alien technology overrode every security protocol Luna Station possessed. "Madam President," her aide shouted, but she was already gone. The last thing Evans saw was Kell's expression, not diplomatic anymore, but coldly triumphant. The Helix Syndicate had played their hand, and they believed they held all the cards. They were catastrophically wrong. Every great journey starts with a few brave explorers. Sci-fi stellar conflict is just beginning, and your support means everything. If you're hungry for HFY battles and tales of human valor against alien might, hit subscribe. It's free, and it helps us bring these front lines to you. Back on Earth, the news hit the Global Defense Council like a thunderbolt. Secretary of Defense James Park stood before the emergency assembly, his face grim as granite. "They've made a mistake," he said quietly. "They think taking our leader makes us weak." General Lisa Torres, head of Special Operations, leaned forward. "What are your orders, Mr. Secretary?" Park's smile was cold as winter steel. "Activate Protocol Black." Across the room, faces went pale. Protocol Black was whispered about in the darkest corners of military intelligence. It was the protocol that didn't officially exist. "Are you certain?" Admiral Chun asked. "Once we unleash them... The Syndicate wanted to see what humanity is capable of," Park interrupted. "They're about to find out why our species conquered an entire planet before we even knew aliens existed." Deep beneath the Pentagon, in levels that appeared on no blueprint, secure communications crackled to life. Messages went out to 3 individuals scattered across the globe. Each message contained only 2 words: Black Protocol. Within hours, the most dangerous humans alive were moving. The galaxy was about to learn that kidnapping Earth's leader wasn't an act of war, it was suicide. Ambassador Kell stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching Earth grow smaller through the viewport. The primitive blue world looked so peaceful, so defenseless. "The human leader is secured in detention level 7, his subordinate reported. "Excellent." Kell clicked his mandibles in satisfaction. "Now we begin phase 2 of the conquest." But even as he spoke, 3 shadows were already moving through the void toward his ship. The Helix Syndicate had captured a president. They had no idea they'd just declared war on the deadliest species in the galaxy. 60 million kilometers from Earth, the Helix flagship Dominion's edge drifted through space like a metal cathedral. Its bioluminescent hull pulsed with alien technology, and its crew of 800 felt secure in their technological superiority. They shouldn't have. Alex Kane materialized on the ship's outer hull, his stealth suit rendering him invisible to Helix sensors. The suit was a masterpiece of human engineering adaptive camouflage that bent light and dampened heat signatures. To alien eyes, he was nothing more than empty space. Ghost 1 in position, he whispered into his his breath creating no visible vapor in the void. Ghost 2 approaching from starboard, came Maya's voice, cool and professional as always. Kane smiled grimly. Maya Santos had been his partner for 7 years, and she could slip through security systems like smoke through a keyhole. If anyone could get them inside undetected, it was her. Ghost 3 holding at escape vector, rumbled the third voice. Jake Turner, their extraction specialist, piloted a ship that officially didn't exist. Kane pressed his palm against the alien. Feeling for vibrations. The Helix used biometal construction, which meant their ships were essentially living organisms. It also meant they had weaknesses that purely mechanical vessels didn't. Found a neural cluster, he reported, pulling out a device that looked like a cross between a scalpel and a tuning fork. Beginning infiltration. The biometal parted like flesh around the neural disruptor, creating an entry point just large enough for a human. Kane slipped inside, entering a maintenance conduit that pulsed with organic rhythm. Inside the ship, Maya had already disabled 3 security nodes with surgical precision. Her tools were old-fashioned by human standards: lockpicks, electronic scramblers, and molecular wire, but the aliens had never encountered such primitive yet effective methods. These Helix are too dependent on their technology, she murmured, bypassing another sensor array. They can't adapt to analog solutions. Kane dropped silently into a corridor, his suit shifting to match the bioluminescent patterns of the walls. 2 alien guards walked past him, their elongated heads swiveling as they patrolled. They saw nothing. Humans are remarkable creatures. One guard was saying in their harmonic language, which Kane's translator parsed instantly. So primitive, yet they achieved spaceflight. Barely, the other replied with what sounded like amusement. Their leader begged for mercy when we took her. Kane's jaw tightened, but he remained motionless until they passed. President Evans begging for mercy? Not the woman who had stared down dictators and terrorists without flinching. The aliens were either lying or severely misreading human behavior. Maya's voice crackled in his earpiece. Located the detention levels. 7 floors down, heavy security. Copy that. Moving to rendezvous point. Kane ghosted through corridors that defied human architecture, past rooms filled with technology that would have made Earth scientists weep with envy. But technology was only as good as the beings using it, and the Helix had made a fundamental error. They thought humans were simple dot in the flagship's command center. Ambassador Kell received reports from across his fleet. The other human leaders were responding, predictably demanding negotiations, threatening economic sanctions, pleading for their president's safe return. Pathetic, Kell mused to his tactical officer. Their response is entirely emotional, no strategic thinking whatsoever. Perhaps we underestimated their attachment to this single individual, the officer suggested. Kell's mandibles clicked dismissively. Humans form primitive pack bonds. Remove the alpha, and the pack scatters. Within a solar rotation, they'll be fighting among themselves for leadership. Neither alien noticed the slight distortion in the air near the communication panel, where Kane crouched invisible and recording everything. Down in detention level 7. President Evans sat in her energy field cell, apparently defeated. Her shoulders slumped, her head hung low, and she occasionally wiped at her eyes. The guards saw exactly what she wanted them to see. In reality, Evans was memorizing guard rotations, studying the energy field's fluctuation patterns, and mentally mapping the facility's layout. She had been trained by the same instructors who taught the protocol black operatives, and capture was just another form of intelligence gathering. When her rescuers arrived, she would be ready. Ghost 1 and 2 converging on detention level, Kane reported. Copy. Turner's voice came from their extraction ship. I've got eyes on 3 Helix patrol cruisers. They're getting nervous about something. Kane smiled coldly. The aliens were about to learn that taking a human leader wasn't conquest, it was the opening move in their own destruction. Detention level 7 hummed with alien technology, but Maya Santos moved through its corridors like a predator born to hunt in artificial light. The Helix security systems were sophisticated, but they were designed to stop alien minds that thought in predictable patterns. Human minds were chaos given form. Neural disruptors placed, she whispered, attaching her third device to a biometal wall. When these activate, their security grid will think it's having a stroke. Kane slipped past 2 more guards, his suit's adaptive camouflage making him a living shadow. The aliens were nervous now, though they didn't understand why. Their ship felt wrong, not damaged, but violated. It was an instinctive response to having apex predators aboard. 30 seconds to neural cascade, Maya announced in the command center above. Cal studied tactical displays showing Earth's response to the kidnapping. Military vessels were moving, but slowly and predictably. The human fleet was impressive for such a young species, but it would take days to reach his position. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we're detecting some unusual energy fluctuations in the lower decks." "Specify," Cal ordered. "Unknown." "The patterns don't match any known." The lights went out. Emergency systems activated immediately. But for 10 seconds, the flagship was blind. 10 seconds was an eternity in combat, and the humans used every nanosecond. Maya's neural disruptors fired simultaneously, sending cascading failure signals through the ship's bio-neural network. Security barriers flickered, internal communications scrambled, and motion detectors registered ghost contacts everywhere as the ship's nervous system convulsed. Kane reached President Evans's cell just as the energy field destabilized. She was already standing, her earlier dejection vanishing like morning mist. "About time," she said calmly. "I was getting bored." "Ma'am, we need to move fast," Kane replied, helping her step through the failing barrier. "Are there other prisoners?" Kane blinked. Even in the middle of a rescue operation, she was thinking about others. "Negative. You're the only human aboard." "Then, let's give them something to remember us by." Maya appeared at the corridor's end, her movements fluid and purposeful. "Guards incoming from both directions, 20 seconds. Evans smiled, and Kane saw the steel that had made her the most feared. Negotiator in human politics. "Do we have any surprises for our hosts?" Kane pulled a device from his suit, a small cylinder that hummed with contained energy. Electromagnetic pulse grenade. "It'll cripple their biosystems without killing them." "How merciful of us, Evans," said dryly. The first group of guards rounded the corner, their weapons raised and energy cells glowing. They saw 3 humans standing in the open, apparently trapped. They had no idea they were looking at death incarnate. Kane triggered the INEB grenade and rolled it down the corridor. The device detonated in a flash of invisible energy that sent the biometal walls into spasms. The guards' weapons died instantly, their communication implants went silent, and the corridor's lighting shifted to emergency bioluminescence. Maya moved like liquid violence, striking nerve clusters with surgical precision. The aliens dropped, unconscious before they could even cry out. Human anatomy might be different from helix physiology, but pressure points were pressure points. "Clear," she reported. The second group of guards approached more cautiously, but caution meant nothing when your enemies rewrote the rules of engagement with every breath. President Evans picked up one of the disabled alien weapons, examining its biomechanical interface. Within seconds, she had figured out how to activate its emergency power cells. "Impressive," Kane murmured. "I didn't become president by being slow to adapt," she replied, testing the weapon's weight. "Now, shall we introduce these creatures to human hospitality?" Above them, Kel stared at reports flooding in from across his ship. Security failures, communication breakdowns, guards falling unconscious with no explanation. His bioluminescent skin flickered with patterns of confusion and growing alarm. "How many intruders are aboard?" he demanded. "Unknown, sir. Sensor readings are inconsistent." "Inconsistent how?" "Sometimes we detect one individual, sometimes 3. Sometimes not at all." Kel's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of extreme stress. "That's impossible." "Yes, sir. But the reading suggests these humans can somehow become invisible to our detection systems." For the first time since the operation began, Kel felt something he had never associated with humans. Fear. In the corridor below, Kane led the small group toward the extraction point, moving through the ship's bioneural passages like antibodies to an infected bloodstream. Every step took them deeper into alien territory. But somehow the ship itself seemed to be helping them, lights dimming to provide cover, passages opening at just the right moments. The ship's nervous system is still scrambled, Maya explained. Seeing Kane's questioning look, it can't tell friend from foe anymore. President Evans smiled grimly. Remind me to fund the special operations budget increase when we get home. They were 50 meters from the extraction point when the real test began. Kel had deployed his elite guards warriors bred for combat, equipped with the finest weapons the Helix Syndicate could provide. They moved through the ship's corridors with deadly purpose, determined to recapture the human leader and eliminate the intruders. They were about to learn why humans had conquered their own world through warfare, and why Earth's deadliest operatives were called ghosts. The hunters had become the hunted. The elite guards moved through the ship's organic corridors like living weapons, their enhanced senses tracking the faintest traces of human presence. They were the Helix Syndicate's finest warriors, genetically perfected for combat over countless generations. It wouldn't be enough. Kane pressed himself against a bioluminescent wall that pulsed like a heartbeat, his suit mimicking the pattern perfectly. 3 guards passed within arm's reach, their elongated heads swiveling as they searched for any sign of their quarry. President Evans crouched beside him, holding the alien weapon she'd appropriated with comfortable familiarity. In the dim emergency lighting, her face showed no fear, only the cold calculation of a leader who had survived 40 years of political warfare. Maya's in position, Kane whispered into his com. 50 meters ahead, Maya Santos waited in the shadows like a patient spider. Her hands held weapons that were elegant in their simplicity, molecular wire and neural disruptors. Tools that the Helix had never encountered because they were too primitive to imagine. The lead guard paused directly beneath her hiding spot, his biomechanical sensors sweeping the area methodically. He found nothing because he was looking for advanced technology, not a human female hanging from organic ceiling supports like a hunting predator. Maya dropped silently, her wire loop settling around the guard's neck before he could react. The molecular edge cut through his breathing apparatus without resistance, and he collapsed unconscious, alive, but neutralized. His companions spun toward the sound, raising weapons that hummed with lethal energy. They saw Maya standing in the open, apparently helpless and outnumbered 2 to 1. They still didn't understand humans. Kane and President Evans moved simultaneously, attacking from behind while the guards focused on the obvious threat. The aliens were fast, but humans had learned to fight dirty over millions of years of evolution. Evans drove her commandeered weapon into the nearest guard's nerve cluster, sending bioelectric feedback through his enhanced nervous system. Kane struck the other with a neural disruptor that scrambled the alien's sensory input, leaving him flailing at hallucinations. In 15 seconds, 3 of the Syndicate's finest warriors were down. Clean work, Evans commented, checking the alien weapons power levels with practiced efficiency. Ma'am, with respect, you're supposed to be a rescued hostage, Kane said, reloading his own weapons. Agent Kane, I was commanding military operations before you were born, she replied coolly. I didn't become president by hiding behind bodyguards. Maya grinned despite their situation. I like her. They reached the extraction point, an airlock that Jake Turner had modified to accept their exfiltration pod. The biometal walls were scarred where he'd forced a connection, but the seal held against the vacuum of space. Ghost 3, we're at the door, Kane reported. Copy that. I've got company topside 6 Helix patrol cruisers converging on your position. Through the airlock's transparent aluminum window, they could see Turner's stealth ship hovering against the starfield like a metallic shadow. It was sleek, dangerous, and completely invisible to Helix sensors. 30 seconds to connection, Turner announced. That's when Ambassador Kell arrived with his personal guard. The Helix leader stepped into the corridor like an avatar of alien authority, his bioluminescent skin blazing with patterns of rage and humiliation. Behind him came a dozen warriors in powered armor that gleamed with predatory menace. Humans, Kell's translated voice dripped with contempt. You have violated our vessel and assaulted our personnel. Surrender now, and we will grant you swift execution. President Evans stepped forward, her commandeered weapon steady in her hands. At 62 years old, facing odds of 4 to 1 against alien super soldiers, she smiled. Ambassador Kell, she said pleasantly. I believe you made an error in judgment. The error was yours, attempting this foolish rescue. No, Evans replied, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had negotiated with dictators and terrorists for decades. Your error was thinking you could intimidate the human species by kidnapping our leader. Kel's mandibles clicked. Dismissively, your species is primitive and weak. You have no concept of true warfare. Behind President Evans, Kane and Maya exchanged glances. They had fought in conflicts across 6 continents, eliminated terrorist cells that had plagued civilization for generations, and survived battles that would have broken lesser minds. The Helix were about to receive an education in human warfare. You want to see what humans are capable of? Evans asked softly. The airlock sealed with a pneumatic hiss, and Turner's ship began moving away from the Helix flagship. But instead of fleeing, it held position 50 meters away, close enough for the aliens to see what happened next. Kane triggered a device he'd been carrying since boarding, a signal amplifier that penetrated the ship's bioneural shielding. Protocol Black is active, he announced into his communicator dot across the galaxy. 47 other human operatives received the signal simultaneously. Within hours, every major Helix military installation would be infiltrated. Within days, the Syndicate's leadership would be systematically captured or eliminated. Within weeks, the alien empire would be begging for the same mercy they had refused to show humanity. Ambassador Kell watched the human ship disappear into the void, not yet understanding that his civilization had just declared war on the most dangerous species in the galaxy. President Evans was safe, but the real battle was just beginning, and humanity had never lost a war. The Helix Syndicate's greatest mistake wasn't kidnapping President Evans. It wasn't underestimating human technology or tactical capabilities. Their fatal error was believing that humans were like them, a species that could be cowed by displays of superior firepower. They never imagined that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't technology at all. 40-8 hours after the rescue, Ambassador Kell stood before the Syndicate High Council, his bioluminescent skin flickering with patterns of barely controlled panic. The council chamber's organic walls pulsed with agitation as reports flooded in from across their territory. 17 command posts have gone silent, Kell reported, his harmonic voice tight with stress. Our fortress world of Calyx has been completely infiltrated, and our intelligence networks, they're reporting impossible things. High Counselor Vex, eldest of the Syndicate leadership, leaned forward in his biomechanical throne. Define impossible. Humans appearing inside sealed bunkers. Security systems failing without cause. Our best warriors found unconscious with no memory of their attackers. Kell's mandibles clicked rapidly. It's as if these humans can walk through walls and become invisible at will. Preposterous, another counselor interjected. Their technology is centuries behind ours. That's when the chamber's lighting failed. Emergency power activated within seconds, but it was too late. When the bioluminescent walls resumed their glow, a human stood in the center of the chamber, a woman with silver hair and cold eyes, holding an alien weapon with comfortable familiarity. Good evening, gentlemen, President Evans said pleasantly. I believe we need to discuss new terms. The council erupted into chaos. Guards rushed into the chamber, weapons charging with lethal energy. Alarms blared throughout the massive structure. Emergency protocols activated across the Syndicate's home system. None of it mattered. Maya Santos materialized behind the High Counselor's throne, her molecular wire gleaming in the emergency lighting. Kane stepped from the shadows near the chamber's exit, blocking any escape route. Jake Turner's voice crackled from hidden speakers as his ship held position outside the fortress. This is impossible, Vex whispered. How did you penetrate our defenses? President Evans smiled, and every alien in the chamber felt their evolutionary instincts scream warnings about apex predators. You made the mistake of thinking like conquerors instead of survivors. I don't understand. Your species conquered through technological superiority, Evans explained, her weapon never wavering. You overwhelm primitive civilizations with advanced ships and powerful weapons. It's worked for you for centuries. Kane stepped closer to the exit, his presence blocking 12 alien guards without visible effort. But humans didn't conquer our world through technology. We did it through pure, savage determination to survive. Maya's voice was soft as silk and twice as deadly. We learned to hunt creatures larger and stronger than ourselves. We learned to turn our enemies' strengths into weaknesses. We learned to adapt, improvise, and overcome obstacles that should have destroyed us. And most importantly, President Evans continued, we learned to work together. When you kidnapped me, you didn't remove our leader, you gave 30 billion humans a common enemy. The chamber's walls displayed tactical information from across syndicate space, and the news was catastrophic. Human operatives had infiltrated every major installation simultaneously. Supply lines were severed, communication networks compromised, command structures systematically dismantled. Your technology is impressive, Evans admitted, but it makes you dependent. When your systems fail, you're helpless. When our systems fail, we improvise. High Counselor Vex stared at the tactical displays with growing horror. What do you want? Unconditional surrender, Evans replied without hesitation. Complete withdrawal from human space. Reparations for the act of war you committed by kidnapping me. And if we refuse? Kane's smile was winter cold. Then we demonstrate what 47 Protocol Black operatives can accomplish when they stop being polite. The implied threat hung in the air like a blade. The Helix Syndicate had never encountered humans before this contact, but they were learning. Fast, these weren't primitive savages to be conquered with superior firepower. They were survivors who had clawed their way to the top of their world's food chain through sheer, bloody-minded refusal to quit. You're bluffing, one counselor said desperately. 47 individuals cannot destroy an interstellar empire. President Evans checked her weapon's power level with casual efficiency. Ambassador Kell thought 3 individuals couldn't rescue me from your flagship. How did that work out? The silence stretched until Vex finally spoke, his voice heavy with defeat. What are your terms? Immediate ceasefire. Withdrawal of all syndicate forces beyond the Vega line. Compensation for damages. And a formal acknowledgement that humanity is not to be trifled with. And in return, we won't wipe your species from the galaxy. Evans's voice carried the absolute certainty of someone who had negotiated with terrorists and won. Because unlike you, we believe in mercy for enemies who surrender. The High Council voted unanimously to accept. 3 months later, President Evans stood once again on Luna Station's observation deck, watching as the last Helix transport departed human space. The peace treaty had been signed, reparations delivered, and a buffer zone established that would keep the 2 species separated for the foreseeable future. Ma'am, her aide approached carefully, the Galactic Council has sent another invitation. 17 different species want to establish diplomatic relations. Evans smiled, remembering Kell's expression when he realized that kidnapping Earth's leader had been the worst mistake in his species' history. Tell them we're interested in talking. But remind them that we prefer negotiations to begin with mutual respect. Behind her, the stars sparkled with infinite possibility. Humanity had announced its presence to the galaxy, not through conquest or intimidation, but through something far more impressive. They had shown that humans were the species you really didn't want as enemies, and that was the most powerful weapon of all.